G'day there guys, Marky here, and welcome back to another episode of r/relationship advice. Let's go. Posted by user Throwaway Baby Name, titled, Am I the asshole for breaking my fiance's family tradition by naming my son what I wanted? Throwaway because I have in-laws on Reddit. So myself, 25 female, and my fiance, 27 male, have a 2-month-old son. We are overjoyed at being parents, but most of my in-laws are refusing to even see our baby because of a decision we made concerning his name. My in-laws have a tradition of giving the firstborn son of every generation the same name. Let's say it's Peter. This has been going on for about 7 generations already, and they are very serious about it. My fiance's eldest cousin was the latest person to get named Peter. Every one of his cousins has only had daughters so far, so our baby is the first son of his generation, and consequently should get the name. I have no problem with the name Peter, and would have been okay with naming my son that. Unfortunately, that was also the name of my uncle, who died before I was born. I won't get into details, but it was tragic and traumatizing for my family. My father never got over losing his younger brother. My grandmother asked for the family not to name any of our future children Peter during her lifetime. My mother-in-law and father-in-law knew about this promise, and at first seemed to not only be okay with us avoiding the name Peter, but also supportive of the one that we chose. However, my grandmother sadly passed away when I was 7 months pregnant. We traveled for her funeral, and on our last days there, my in-laws called to offer me their condolences. Then my mother-in-law asked me if I was willing to think about the name Peter now. Suddenly, they were insistent that the name we chose was awful and we had to honor their tradition. According to them, they had only agreed to make an exception for us for my grandmother's sake and had no obligation to keep it now that she had passed. My family agrees that while it's true we don't have to avoid the name anymore, it still doesn't feel right to use it. My fiancé agrees with me as well, but his parents spent the last few weeks of pregnancy trying to convince us to change our minds about the name. When our baby was born and we named him what we wanted, my in-laws were furious that we had broken a 7-generation-old family tradition. Some of them hadn't previously wanted to name their sons Peter, but did it anyway for the family's sake. They said our decision was selfish and that my family should have moved on by now. This has truly nothing to do with whether my family has moved on or not. It just felt like a betrayal to my grandmother and uncle's memories to even consider using the name. My father-in-law offered us $1,000 to change our son's name to Peter after he was born. That was 2 months ago, and neither of my fiance's parents have met the baby or seen us since I was pregnant. Most of my in-laws are on their side, and this is causing a huge rift between my fiancé and his family. He assures me he is fine, but I'm starting to feel really guilty about this. Am I the asshole? Edit, the tradition started, as far as I know, when OG Peter died, and his son, also named Peter, named his firstborn after his father. Peter III ended up having the first son of the following generation, and did the same thing. That one died before having children, so his sister gave the name to her son, and so on. The name Peter is very common in my country, so none of them ever got bullied over it, and the fact that it was also my uncle's name isn't as unlikely as one might think. Also, middle names aren't used in my country. Most people get the maternal surname before the paternal one instead. And edit, it wasn't $1,000. Different country, different currency. It's still a lot of money, but would probably translate to about $200 USD. I guess my personal beliefs on this situation is that tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. You can choose to follow it and you can choose to respect it if you would like to, but you don't have to. Only these idiots that are alive and want the tradition to continue are going to continue doing that, and they're the only ones that are going to give you grief over this. It sucks that they can't see this and refuse to see this from your point of view and are just dogpiling on you and refusing to see the baby. That's their choice. I don't agree with them, but I do agree with you in sticking to your guns. So I think you're not the asshole for this. In the comments, Rich Signal 7022 says, not the asshole. After 7 generations, I think it's time that their family moved on. And OP replies, I've always been surprised it even lasted that long. And no offense, but that's a pretty vague tradition. How do they even keep track of each new gen to determine this? I have cousins 15 years older than me and 15 years younger. My husband has cousins 25 years younger than him. At some point, this has got to get more confusing than it's worth, right? And OP replies, generation basically means line of cousins to them. I only kind of get it, but I think basically every first time a cousin has a child, he or she is the first of the generation. My maternal family kind of works like that too. I'm 20 years older than one of my youngest cousins, but we're still from the same generation. His uncle, while only 4 years older than me, is from my mum's. Sorry, I'm really bad at explaining this. Damon says, here's something that might blow their minds. Your son probably shares very little genetics with their great-grandparents. Your son has 2 copies of every gene, one from you and one from your husband. When your husband produced the sperm that made your son, it randomly selected one of each of his genes. That means that it's possible that he passed on all of the genes that he got from his mother and none of the genes that he got from his father, and the same goes for your egg. On average, it's 50-50, but even that means that you share 50/25, 12.5, 6.25, 3.125, % of your genes with an ancestor who is 7 generations back. Basically, they're making a big deal about dissension in one particular line and ignoring all the other genetic lines that have all contributed. But chances are, at this point, the newest generation barely has any genes at all from the foundational Peter. Hell yeah, let's go says, not the asshole. Family name traditions are weird, and you can do whatever you want and name your baby whatever you want. Keep pushing the I'm honoring my late grandmother's final wishes hard so they see how unhinged they sound asking you to flout that. Derpney13 replies, and as a grandma, the idea of rejecting a child based on a name is simply trifling. It's downright shallow, petty, and a real ugly representation of one's integrity. Honestly, the longer these people avoided my child, the less their value would be worth in my child's life. Who would want such people around after a while? What would they bring to the table for my child? How would people like this positively enrich his or her development? I feel bad for OP's partner, as this behavior surely has hurt him. Otherwise, I would consider this behavior a possibly important reveal to who these people are and what kind of chaos they could be capable of. And now, on to the update. Thank you so much to everyone who commented and offered support. A lot has happened since I posted, so I thought I'd give you an update. About a week after my post, my fiancé's parents contacted us. They apologized for their behavior, and they begged to meet my son. They said they were ready to leave the naming debacle behind and truly wanted to be involved in their grandson's life. We were skeptical, but invited them over to meet the baby. The visit went well. They began coming over almost every day during the next 3 weeks. I noticed neither of them ever called my son by his name, but I didn't point it out. For the first time in months, things seemed good between my fiancé and his parents. One day, my fiancé was helping my father-in-law with something at our place, so my mother-in-law and I went back to the park with my baby. Sometime later, I had to go to the bathroom, so I left him in the stroller with her. When I got back, she was sitting on a park bench, chatting with a woman who was cooing over my son. I went over there and introduced myself as son's name Mom, and she said, I thought his name was Peter. I didn't say a word, and neither did my mother-in-law. She followed me to the car, and we went back to my apartment. On the way there, I texted my fiancé about what had happened. The moment we got there, he kicked both his parents out of our place. He had read my texts and confronted his father. Thankfully, my father-in-law is a terrible liar and confessed immediately. Apparently, both my in-laws only call my son Peter. That includes whenever they're talking about him, every time they introduce him to someone else, and even baby talking to him on the few occasions they were left alone with him. Neither of them are embarrassed by this, and they both think they're in the right. We are heartbroken, especially my fiancé, not only because his parents can't let go of their pride, but also because the name we chose for our son means a lot to us both. I blame myself for encouraging my fiancé to allow them near our son. I was raised in a different city than all my grandparents and always wished they could have been more involved in my life. Losing my grandmother didn't help. Pretty much every doubt I had only existed because I thought that it would be important for my son to grow up with all of his grandparents around. But now, all of my guilt is gone. If they can't respect my son enough to call him by his name, they don't deserve to be in his life. I hope they enjoyed the 3 weeks they had with their grandson, because that's all they're getting until they get their heads out of their asses. In the comments, Ingenate Kenny says, "It's a sad situation, and I'm sorry about it, OP. You gave them a chance, and they threw it away like chumps, and then you and your husband communicated and made an adult decision on something so difficult together. You should be proud. I hope your grandson grows up proud of his parents and his name." Is this really the hill the parents chose to die on? This is so effing stupid. The in-laws are being incredibly dense. They came around once, and I suspect that they will do it again. Give them a few months to stew about it while you post up happy videos of your kid being awesome and cute. In the meantime, find the most awesome and colorful decorations that you can with the kid's name on them and cover their room with them. The in-laws should be required to get monogrammed gifts for the baby every event with his correct name until they settle down. Sorry, mother-in-law, you can't come see Nathan unless you get him a 1-year-old onesie with his real name written on it. Tasty Championship says, "I am so sorry to hear this. How disrespectful. It is understandable that you want to set and maintain boundaries with them when they have not shown your family respect and continue to put their needs above yours." Yikes. Are they psychotic and unhinged about other things in life, or just this one issue? OP replies, "According to my fiancé, they've always been a little bit entitled, but I never really saw them enough to be able to say that. I will say that, though they were polite, they very clearly didn't care about me until we moved in together. My mother-in-law pretended not to remember my name every time she saw me, and my father-in-law would lose interest in any conversations that weren't about him. Once it was clear me and my fiancé were in for the long term, they started acting a lot more friendly towards me, but it never seemed sincere." Ellie replies, "I've had a similar issue. They kept calling me by the ex's name and also one of their siblings' names because they're similar. I can understand the sibling one because of how close the names are, but not the ex. It was clearly intentional, because once the distance went away, harassment started. Every chance was taken to give me shit for something. Pro tip, if invasive in-laws suddenly hang around a lot more than usual or ask heaps more questions, keep an eye out. They are up to something. Seems like unfortunately you ran into this too. I hope they do pull their heads out of their asses, because when it comes to a name, it won't be long before your kiddo can correct them himself. It'd be great if he didn't have to do that, of course, but imagine the embarrassment they'd have when he himself corrected them instead of you when the stranger was talking to mother-in-law. So much more shame. It also unfortunately may look like he was kidnapped or not in safe hands if the person looking after him can't even get his name right. Best of luck with it all, OP. I hope the dust settles and everything is chill for all again soon." And OP replies, "When the lady from the park asked about his name, it did cross my mind that she might think that I was a kidnapper. His name is written on one of his blankets though, which calmed me down a little. Still, I can't help but think of what my mother-in-law would have done had the woman threatened to call the cops." Yeah, that doesn't sound like a fun situation to be involved in. I personally wouldn't like to imagine how that would play out, but definitely seems as though it would result in very low contact, close to complete no contact, again, for an extended period of time with these people. I stand by my judgment on the am I the arsehole one. I do think that these people need to get over the name, and I think they're assholes for their continued actions. Especially in this update, they deserve no sympathy after what they've done. But I'll turn this to you guys. What do you guys think of this one? Let me know down in the comments below. Our next post is by user AverageHungry6981, titled, "Teenage son messed up big time, and I am afraid of what happens next. Throw away because I'm ashamed to have this linked to my main. My son is 17 and just started driving. He used my car, a Honda Civic, to go to and from school sometimes. I was at home this week when 3 police cars came in our driveway and officers were banging on our door. Turns out my son rear-ended a vehicle and drove away. To make it even worse, the driver was a cop in his personal truck. It took maybe 15 minutes from the incident to when they came knocking. The hit truck has no damage. It was a tap at maybe 15 miles per hour into his towing hitch. Our Civic's license plate is bent and there is some bumper damage. The truck driver filed an insurance claim with our insurance. My son admitted fault. There is also video footage of everything. I am beyond freaked out, and I haven't slept since. I scolded my son, but there is so much that I can do now. He says he freaked out about hitting an expensive new truck and just drove off. I explained how wrong that was. What I am more concerned about is that the drivers pressed charges to teach this kid a lesson. The cops on scene said that it's up to the other driver if he wants this charged, and he chose to. We were told my son will be formally charged on Monday by the prosecutor and possibly arrested. Fleeing the scene of an accident is an arrestable offense here, and it carries jail time too. I'm scared shitless. I'm a single mom. I can't afford to pay lawyers to keep my son out of prison when we barely afford rent, food, and bills. I know my insurance rates will be effed for years to come. His too, probably. What do we do here? Thanks. In the comments, Kitchen Economics says, I had a friend that did the exact same thing at 16, but not to a nice truck, it was a nice BMW. Cops came to his house and took down his info, then he was given a ticket to pay like $1,000 in fines and had to do 16 hours of community service. He was charged with a misdemeanor hit and run, but the charges were dropped once the fine and community service was paid. Insurance went up for a while too. This was in California. Not a lawyer, but this is likely what you're looking at, OP. Depends on the judge you get and if your kid shows remorse or not. OP and his mum can also petition the judge to try a probationary period in place of a stiff fine and community service. This was me at 17, and I got off with court costs of $150 and 12 months of no moving violations, along with 30 hours of community service. Are you in the US? If the prosecutor does decide to bring criminal charges, your son should be appointed a public defender. Depending on the jurisdiction, it may end up being someone who specializes in working with juvenile clients. They will help you navigate the system and work out a resolution with the court. Be very clear at his court appearances that you cannot afford an attorney. You should have someone who these kinds of cases are an everyday thing for at your side. As a first offense and him being 17, I don't think prison is likely. Also, you can get a public defender. He might do jail time or community service in probation type situation, possibly not able to have a license for a while. It's all based on damages. Your attorney will settle it down. It's a shit thing that he did, but they'll recognize he is young, he got scared, and he owned up to it right away. And now, onto the update. I really appreciate everyone's input and words, some good, some bad. We've been a ball of stress since last week. He was officially charged with leaving the scene of an accident and fined for failure to maintain speed. I spoke to a few lawyers around town, and they all agreed there is zero chance the DA will drop the charge. Our county is very tough on crime, and they're campaigning on it. The DA refused any plea. They have lots of video evidence from the truck front and back dash cameras, a gas station, and an intersection camera. Our focus is to try and get probation instead of jail time. I need to come up with a few hundred for the fine and $1,500 for the lawyer. That's in addition to the insurance rates that will definitely go up. As a kicker, my insurance has small accident forgiveness for damages lower than $500. The insurance estimate for the truck's damaged hitch came out to $504. They also want to suspend my son's license, so he won't be able to go to and from any job that isn't close by. We live in a really spread out area where a car is basically mandatory. I am just so upset with him and his decision making, trying to keep it together and work our way out of this, but it's frustrating. After watching the video, I got even more mad. He clearly recognized he hit the truck, then drove around it and off he went. In the comments, Ollie says, I have no advice, but want to say to you that I'm sorry you're going through this. Your kid made a huge mistake, and I'd be furious with him if I were you. But teenagers are quite prone to making stupid decisions. This is one crappy lesson for him, and I hope the best case scenario plays out. I agree with others who say he needs to pay you back. Is the area you live in okay for bicycling? Can he work somewhere within biking distance? Yeah, I think every kid gets one of these big mistakes, though this was a particularly large one. I hope this kid owns his mistake and pays back his parent at least the $1,500 for the lawyer. Set up a payment plan, say $100 per month, and for every money transfer he sends, make him write he's sorry for what he did. I once hit a parked cop car when picking up a friend from her home. The cop wasn't in it, the street was deserted, and I will admit, I had a few moments of thinking that I should pretend it didn't happen or leave. The urge to not have to deal with the potential shit show was that strong. Luckily, I came to my senses and recalled just how bad it would be to not admit what I'd done and be caught later. I remember that anyone could be watching from their house, including the cop, or have cameras, or be in their yard, etc. As expected, the cop was pissed. His buddies called out 3 squad cars with lights flashing and a crime scene photographer. Neighbors all crowded the street to stare at me. It was scary and humiliating, but I didn't get arrested. I didn't get a ticket, and they even let me pay for the damage directly, but there is no way that I would have gotten off that easy if I had run. Let this be a reminder to any parents. If you don't explicitly teach your kid how to respond to an emergency or accident, they won't respond correctly. Do not assume driver's ed or public school will teach someone what to do in an accident. In my state, it never did. I was smart enough to Google it before I started driving, but my parents didn't bother teaching me. And if I got in an accident at 17, I wouldn't know what was right or wrong either. Seriously, I don't care how old or independent or whatever else you think your kid is. If you've never explained to them, this is how to dial 911 and here is what you say, or, if police pull you over, do as they ask and nothing else, you have not given them those tools. I've had to explain to people my parents' age how to respond to situations like this because they were never taught either. Just because it's obvious to you doesn't mean that it's actually obvious. Empower people you are responsible for. Our next post is by user Celia Kitties, titled, "Am I the asshole for throwing out my husband's friend's food?" So my husband loves his buddy Steve. I would love Steve a lot more if he wasn't always trying to give my cat human food when he is visiting. I've explained it to him many times. Steve, do not give her anything. She is only allowed to have cat food. I have had to do this literally every time he has been in my house with food. Nevertheless, Steve persists. I come home yesterday, and Steve and my husband are throwing darts in the garage. Then they go out and come back with some fast food, including a meal for me. I turn my back for one moment to get some plates, and when I turn back around, I see Steve offering my cat a piece of garlic bread. I yell at him to stop it already, grab his whole meal, and dump it in the trash. He calls me a bitch and reaches for my meal. I grab it away and yell at him to get the hell away from my cat until he's learned some manners. They go back out to the garage and I overhear my husband trying to reason with him a bit, but he's not having it, and he storms out. Steve is pissed, husband is understanding where I'm at with him always trying to feed the cat, but also annoyed and says that I had no right to throw out his meal. I really don't want to see Steve in my house at all anytime soon, but at the very least, I don't want him there with any food until he learns to keep it to himself. Honestly, if it was other foods, I'd be like, maybe not, maybe a bit of an overreaction. But as you said, nonetheless, understandable, and your house, your rules, very much entitled to preserving your cat's life. But garlic, of all things, huge no-no. He's trying to kill your cat if he's giving it garlic bread. Hey, Cheryl, you don't mind if I feed your cat arsenic real quick, do ya? Sick, he loves it, look at this. He's eating it right up, he loves that arsenic. I'm going to go with a not the asshole judgment for this one, OP. I kind of think he deserves it for trying to feed your cat poison and not understanding what he was doing and then saying that you're the problem. In the comments, Saint Alvis says, not the asshole. Garlic is famously poisonous to cats. What the actual F? Cricket162 replies, not the asshole. My boyfriend tried to give our new kitten meat that was seasoned with garlic the other day, and I barely stopped her from eating it. I had to Google it to prove to him that it's poisonous for the kitten. I put my foot down and told him that the kitten is never allowed to have human food. OP, tell your husband how toxic garlic is for cats so he hopefully understands the severity of the situation. If Steve can't respect your rule regarding the cats, tell them that they'll have to hang out somewhere else if he won't stop giving human food to the cats. Anonymous for this says, not the asshole. Garlic is toxic to cats. Steve thinks that he can overrule you in your own house. While throwing out a guest's food is not polite, food was the focus of Steve's misbehavior. Consequences are important. Your husband doesn't seem to understand that Steve does not outrank you in your own house, and it would be a perfectly reasonable consequence to say that Steve is no longer welcome in your house. Aside from the attempted poisoning, what's getting me right now is that Steve called her a bitch in their home. That is a trash word to use against a woman. OP's husband should have shut that shit down immediately. Thank you. I would have gone in on both of them had my husband allowed his buddy to disrespect me like that in my own house. My guess is that's the point. Steve wants to stir shit and cause problems with OP's marriage. Dozens of different potential reasons why, but OP needs to talk it out with husband, and husband needs to have a long conversation with Steve. I disagree. Husband needs to have a short conversation with Steve. Never feed the cat again, apologize to OP, and never use that language again about OP, or the friendship is over. End of conversation. And I kind of agree with that one there, actually. I will renege on my previous point of saying, you know what, I can see how it might have been an overreaction had it not been garlic. I glossed over the fact that he called her a bear. I completely just forgot that happened in the short time that I read this story. Completely unacceptable behavior. Stand up for your partner. Do not take this disrespect lightly and slap that man back in his place. If he refuses to respect those boundaries, get rid of him, plain and simple. I'm sure there's more Steves out there that we can be good friends with. Anyway, guys, that's where I'm going to end today's episode. I do hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think about it down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.